Tonight, there's plenty of reaction in this province and beyond to U.S. President Donald Trump's latest tariffs.
Unless the President of the United States stops threatening our sovereignty, we should not be at any table.
Outgoing Premier Andrew Furey emphasizes a strong stance amid the ongoing trade war.
Today, we celebrate a victory not only for women, but all who believe in equality, fairness, and the true spirit of democracy.
This is not the end. This is not, hang up your laurels, we're there. This is just another chapter in a long story that has to continue.
100 years ago on this day, women in the province won the right to vote. The milestone and all female leaders were celebrated at an official event.
We're aiming for community members. In order for our community to be healthy, we need to help them all.
The Innu community of Shahajit will open a detox center to deal with substance use issues.
This is CBC Here and Now.
Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. We begin tonight with the fishery. While there is relief today that no new tariffs on seafood were introduced by the United States, the ongoing threat from President Donald Trump will fundamentally change the industry in this province. Here and Now's Peter Cowan looks at the impact.
Fishermen here in St. John's are getting ready to put these crab traps in the water, and one of the big questions has been, how much are they going to get paid for their catch? Processors had offered to pay $1 less a pound if tariffs came into effect. So people here are relieved that they might get more for their catches this year than they had feared. But processors are still worried. Just because they've dodged the bullet doesn't mean the United States has put down the gun. And so they're still working to try and find other markets. For example, one person I talked to today said he's still going to be headed to Mexico, headed to Europe to try and find other buyers there, because right now about half of his seafood is sold into the United States, and he's still worried that tariffs may still come into effect at some point in the future.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We are not going to be any less relentless in pursuing new markets, particularly in Europe and in Mexico and across Canada. We certainly welcome and we see some positive results from the Buy Canada movement. Let's keep the pressure on because if there's one thing we know about Mr. Trump, he is unpredictable.
He's also worried about what Trump's tariffs on Europe or Asia will do to customers there. Seafood is a high-end product, and if the economies there take a hit, people may stop buying things like Canadian crab or scallops. The Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador isn't backing down from the efforts to try and pressure the United States. Even though the industries in this province, things like oil and gas and critical minerals and, of course, the fishery aren't impacted by the tariffs, he says they still need to put pressure by doing things like keeping American liquor off the shelves.
If you're attacking auto manufacturer workers in southern Ontario, you're attacking Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, and as a consequence, we will continue to make sure that American liquor is not available to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians.
Andrew Furey says we shouldn't be relieved just because there aren't more tariffs. He says more work needs to be done in order to make sure that the existing tariffs are removed and that workers in Canada are protected. Peter Cowan, CBC News, St. John's.
So Canada and this province were largely spared from the newest reciprocal tariffs introduced yesterday, a day Trump has called Liberation Day. But this country's auto sector took a hit with new 25% tariffs. So how could that affect this province? The CBC's Julia Israel explains.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day.
In Trump's latest round of tariffs, Canada is mostly spared. A new 10% tariff on imports will not be applied to Canada. As for the new 25% tariff on all foreign cars going into the U.S., Canada is not exempt. But Newfoundland and Labrador is safe, as the province does not manufacture cars or their parts.
We may have some companies that sell into car companies, more predominantly software, maybe some services, etc. But there's not a enormous sorry, I sound almost like a Trumpian phrase, huge, enormous. There's not an enormous impact versus a lot of our other more traditional industries.
But Canada's auto industry at large will feel the heat.
And so by putting on these tariffs, he's putting these potential barriers and making sure that especially North American automobile manufacturers decide, no, we're not going to necessarily build a new plant in Oshawa, we're going to build it into the United States.
And that might impact anyone in this province in the market for a new vehicle.
As the existing stock, the prices are already set, but new stock may reflect the increased tariff prices.
Over in Ottawa, union leaders from across the country, including this province, are calling for action.
Today's announcement doesn't change anything. We have to continue to put pressure on our federal government, whichever party forms government at the end of this month, to enact real, robust programs that will support workers.
Julia Israel, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, it's not just Canadian politicians fighting against these tariffs. 4 Republicans defied President Donald Trump and yesterday voted against his tariffs on Canadian products. The senator from Maine argued that the bilateral seafood relationship between the two countries is at risk and that tariffs are a losing proposition for both sides. The CBC's Leila Baudouin has more.
There are 240 lobster processing plants in Canada, but only 15 in the United States. If we impose these tariffs on Canadian processing, it's going to be our Maine lobstermen who will bear the cost.
The Republican senator from Maine called the effect of tariffs into question yesterday, echoing what industry leaders in this province have been saying for weeks, emphasizing the two countries' economic ties.
As price hikes always do, they will hurt those the most who can afford them the least.
There's lobster moving on both sides of the border.
Canada-U.S. relations were also at the center of conversations here during North America's biggest seafood expo in Boston last month. We caught up with Nat Richard, the executive director of the Lobster Processors Association, which has members across the Maritimes.
Both countries have a lobster fishery. There's about a 2-to-1 ratio in terms of landings.
And that's where the problem is for the U.S. industry, according to Richard. Its supply does not meet the demand for seafood in the country. The bulk of processing is done here in Canada.
All of the main catch goes to Canada, to Canadian plants, almost all of it to maritime plants. It gets processed, and it tends to go back as finished product. There is a deep integration between our lobster fisheries, and if you have a sudden dislocation because driven by a tariff that does effectively prevents Canadian plants from procuring in the U.S., it could have catastrophic implications for Maine lobstermen.
With the start of the Canadian lobster fishery around the corner, this display of opposition from within the Republican Party likely doesn't ease the anguish of those in the sector. Leila Baudouin, CBC News.
Well, we have more tonight on plans to open a new detox center in Shahajit. This comes after a few weeks of meetings and checkpoints in and out of the Innu First Nation community. The center will avail of existing programs like the Christian Youth Camp, but will be customized to reflect the local culture.
We're just updating the community just to see where everything is planning out to be, where we're at from stage A to C now, because this is probably our 4th meeting now, third or fourth meeting. We've been doing preparations, how to move forward with the community. We're discussing overall a detox center to do it in a traditional way, but we do have nurses and doctors sort of stepping on board with us, and just moving forward. Is just I think that's really exciting news to hear. Like, there's different agencies are actually going to be joining us and helping us detox our people and get them where they need to be. Well, we do have Christian Youth Camp, and we will have another that's for the regular treatment treatment facility that is like an eight-week program, but this one is more like in the country. Not right in the country, but it's somewhere, a spot that we're picking out, and there will be our detox center. But Christian Youth Camp will be there to help us out as well. Use the mental health hospital in Goose Bay, behind the Melville Hospital, or LGH, the mental health facility they have behind the building. So we'll use that, but we'll bring them back to, once they complete their program there, or their whatever needs to be done, we'll move to the tent area in the culture environment. The important part is like there's going to be elders there to help them out, to assist them as they go, and like I think having Inuit culture involved is very important because our culture is still strong, right? So it's like it's valuable, and there's a lot of medicine in that in many ways. They never really gave any limits, so I would say as much as they can, as many people as we can get, right? The ones that volunteer to go. So as the doors are open, we're letting them.
Well, in other news, 100 years ago today, women achieved the right to vote and hold public office in this province. It was the culmination of decades of activism. That achievement was celebrated today as some well-known women leaders, past and present, gathered at the Confederation Building in St. John's.
Strong with his story, dreams with their glory, lo, they call, and that is their word.
It's important that we mark anniversaries like this and have a discussion and a renewal of our commitment to diversity and equality. And this kind of event just spurs on that kind of conversation. I find it really exhilarating.
As the minister responsible for women and gender equality, I am delighted to be standing here on the 100th anniversary of women achieving the right to vote and hold public office. One of the most significant moments in this province's history was the long-fought battle for women's suffrages, culminating with achieving the right to vote on April 3rd in 1925. And today we celebrate a victory not only for women, but all who believe in equality, fairness, and the true spirit of democracy.
Later this spring, near Colonial Building in Bannerman Park, we will see a statue unveiled of Armine Notting Gosling to honour her and the others who worked relentlessly to achieve the right for women to hold office and to vote. As that critical vote approached, the Daily News said in March of 1925, "If a woman is not a person, then what in the name of common sense is she?"
I think it's critically important to know how hard it was to get where we are, and never to forget that it took a lot of very courageous, determined women to get us here. But I think the message, and I think it was Pam Parsons who said it, this is not the end. This is not, hang up your laurels, we're there. This is just another chapter in a long story that has to continue.
To come here and see the women who came before me on whose shoulders I stood. This is never one person's effort. It's the work of many, and it goes on and on. It's delightful to celebrate that and to encourage women to think about public life and to show them that there's a long, long cadre in history of women and men who will boost you up and give you their shoulders to stand on as you make your way for all of us.
Now for a look at our weather, today's highs, not that high, but this is the big weather maker that is coming our way, that is going to bring snow to the island and into Labrador tonight and into tomorrow. We'll take a closer look here. It's bringing some snow right now to the southwest coast, and that's going to move across the island. So here's our weather headlines. We've got snow tonight, snow tomorrow, and a cloudy Saturday to kick off your weekend before we have another system move in.
Well, to Labrador now. At the recent Innu Daemun Music Festival, some members of the community received awards for their achievements. Among them was Labrador's first Innu nurse, who says the path to advancing healthcare for Shehjit wasn't an easy one.
As a child, a little girl, I've always dreamt of being a nurse. I've always wanted to be a nurse, because I did see a lot of my people were sick. I see there was a lot of my people were always sick with diseases like tuberculosis, impetigo, and chest infections, and little kids with eczema and stuff. First, I applied for nursing school in the province. It didn't work out, and then I applied for school out in Ontario. And I was so lonely, I cried all the time. I wanted to come home. But that didn't stop me, I just kept on going. It was in June 1990, I graduated. It was so exciting, and it was almost like my dream is coming to reality, and it kind of really was emotional for me, because I didn't think I was ever going to do it. But I did work really, really hard. I never gave up. And then in 2010, I became a health director for the Bank Council, and I have been there since. I started off with one myself as a nurse. Another Innu lady, Lorraine Rich, helped me back in 1997. And today, I have 5 registered nurses there, 3 public health nurses, 4 LPNs, 2 home care nurses. It grew, and I'm extremely happy that I have gotten this far from one nurse person. It's a great pleasure to receive that award. And I almost cried after he left, because it was something that was so meaningful to me, and it meant the world to me, because people are out there recognizing me as a person that helped and that have gone through a lot to get to where I am.
So I think as far as people in the queer community are concerned, is nothing changes. There's still rising hate across the country that's targeted against us. There's still memorandums that are being issued by CSIS and warnings of things that have to change. So we have that on top of all of the same economic concerns that everybody else has across the country, right? Queer people are just like everybody else. And I think what we want to see is that as we're seeing this shift from in the election focus to be more about shoring up Canada as an economy, we've got to make sure that we don't lose the humanity in that. We're already seeing signals with the cabinet switches and all the responsibilities of the Minister of Gender Equality going under another former minister. That's a really big role. And that was the department that really supported queer organizations across the country to go in and do the community work that the government wasn't doing. When there's somebody who's seeking refugee status from the States, which is something that we've been getting for the last couple of months, that they're not going to the federal government, they're reaching out to organizations like us. When there's queer youth that are trying to find their way in the community and are trying to make sure that they don't fall out to living on the streets, they're coming to organizations like St. John's Pride and other queer organizations across the country. So what we're going to be looking for is a commitment that Canada sees a value in communities like ours, and that there's a commitment to overcome all of the different threats that we live with day in, day out, so that we can just be members of society working towards the same thing that everybody else is, and that's kind of stabilizing where we are in the economy and making sure that people can have happy, healthy lives.
Well, it's not a view of downtown St. John's you often get to see. We wanted to share this drone video with you. Local videographer Chad Sharp posted this to his Instagram earlier this week. The drone making its way around John Cabot Building next to the Mary Brown Center here. We'll be right back. Well, Heather, thank you so much for taking off your reporter hat for us for a couple of days to fill in for Ashley. We always love having you, so thank you. You mentioned just before the break or earlier in the show that there's lots of snow on the way.
Yeah, some spring snow. A blast of winter is heading our way, and you can see it right here in gray, and it's really going to affect a lot of the southern part of Newfoundland, here from the Avalon Peninsula to the Burin, right over here to the southwest coast of the island. And that's where we're going to see the biggest impact is on the southwest coast. But generally, we're going to see 10 to 20 centimeters of snow. We're going to have wind gusts to 60 up to 80, 90 in the rec house. So we could have some reduced visibility with some of this snow as well. So do be careful on the roads over the next 24 hours or so until this system goes away and we can say sayonara to it. But let's take a look at our future tracker. And this is it. This is the system knocking on our door here right now. It's going to bring snow to Labrador West and firstly to the southwest coast of the island down here. So what we have now is cloud across much of the island. And as we head towards midnight, this system is going to push eastward into western Labrador and into much of the island here as well. And then in the overnight, by the time we wake up tomorrow morning, we'll have snow right across the island. Some flurries sticking around for Labrador though. Now, taking a look at our temperatures for tonight, they're going to be pretty chilly tonight, anywhere from -3 on the southwest coast up to -11 for the island, for the northern peninsula, and for the island portion of the province, seeing a lot of snowflake graphics there, here, and our winds from the southeast, 30 gusting to 50 here for the west coast of the island, but lighter for the rest of the province. In Labrador, we see some snowflakes for the west and in through central, but here along the coast, we see some clouds, so you'll be spared for this one. Taking a look at our future tracker, when we wake up tomorrow morning, we'll see some flurries across Labrador, some cloud, maybe a peak of sun for some places on the coast, but we'll be waking up tomorrow morning in the early morning hours to that snow. Now, that'll start to move off as we head to midday. We'll see this breaking up a little bit here in Labrador, finally see some clouds in behind that system for the southwest coast, and it is going to push itself eastward, but we won't be rid of this system for the east coast or for the Avalon Peninsula and the other peninsulas here in the east until the evening time, and then we've got cloud in behind it. So let's try to also take a look at our accumulations, because how much snow are we going to get? You might be able to see a little tiny bit of purple down here on the south coast. That's our up to 15 centimeters. The darker blue is our 10 to 15, and so we'll see that where the special weather statement was, that gray along the south coast is where we'll get most of the snow. We could see about 5 to 10 elsewhere, and some less up in Labrador. But behind the system, as it moves on out, what we're going to see tomorrow is some wind picking up in behind it as it starts to depart, and we can see some big wind here for the southwest coast there as well as we go into Friday. And the wind starts to settle down after that. Taking a look at our temperatures for tomorrow, things hovering around 0 for the most part. It could be a little bit warmer, like it will be along the south coast of the Avalon Peninsula, or a little bit below freezing for St. John's and in through some parts of central as well, as cold as -5 in St. Anthony, but we see snowflake icons for everybody right across the province tomorrow. And as we move on up into Labrador, we see that snow here in Lab West and in through central Labrador as well, with our temperatures -3, -4 for you folks, and -5 into the Straits, but a little bit cooler for the north coast here in Nain. Some sun and cloud for you at -11, a little bit more cloud for Makovic at -8, but looking like a good day in Cartwright, and some cloud in Mary's Harbour there as well. So we will take a look at your for long range coming up a little later in the show. Saturday, you'll get some reprieve, but Sunday, we have another system moving back in, and we'll talk about that later.
Thanks so much, Heather. Well, this province has the oldest and most rapidly aging population in Canada. And today on CBC Radio's The Signal, guests discussed how government and residents can plan for the years ahead and what needs to be done to support people during this dramatic change in demographics.
Ageism defeats seniors internally. They feel they cannot do something they can do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of potential in seniors, but we tell them once you turn a certain age, that's it.
Can't.
And that we're killing potential, we're killing our resources, and we're killing the pass on of wisdom and knowledge across our community and workplace. Nobody should be told to sit down and stop working unless they want to.
Exactly.
It's not a stigma. It should never be a culture. It should be an individual decision based on the person's preference, conditions. Everybody age differently. Everybody have different challenges in life, but also they can offer different things. We are talking about technology as if it's an obsolete factor for seniors, but let's look at it within the next 10 years. The generation that is very well talented with technology is going to need to use it.
Yeah.
How are you going to learn from how they want to adapt to it if you let younger generation only decide that? Seniors needs to be involved in technology, needs to be involved in this decision. So within the next 5 to 10 years, we can make decisions that are inclusive and make the market inclusive for everybody.
look at that one over there.
Is this good?
Yeah, a little bit more. That felt good.
Therapeutic almost. There's a wrestling ring down there. What's that about?
A lot of... This is wild.
Well, returning now to our top story, there's been plenty of reaction to Donald Trump's latest round of tariffs, which mostly spared this province. Premier Andrew Furey spoke with reporters this morning about tariffs, sovereignty, and Donald Trump. Here's some of what he had to say.
There is some relief, but it shouldn't be full relief. So while I think the first notion was to breathe a sigh of relief, it shouldn't be complete. Because while we weren't on the ridiculous presidential placard as a country, the tariffs that existed before are still very much in place. In addition, now there'll be tariffs on auto manufacturing. And on top of that, he still left an incredible air of uncertainty over the entire announcement by saying he'll still continue to be strategic with future tariffs, whether that's in pharmaceuticals or in other industries. So while we weren't on the poster board, I still think there's significant reason for concern across the country.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. Waiting for a long time.
My stance hasn't changed at all. We need to be united from coast to coast to coast, a strong, firm Team Canada approach, one that is proportional but responsible in its response. Make no mistake, while harvesters, for example, today in Newfoundland and Labrador were spared yesterday, auto workers in Ontario were not. And as Canadians, if there's a family in Ontario who feels pain from an outside influence, we should feel that pain too here in Newfoundland and Labrador. So while we want to celebrate the fact that the fishery was spared, we need to come together as a country for our brothers and sisters and families across the country to meet the moment, and I have no doubt that Prime Minister Carney will meet that moment.
In short, chronic trade deficits are no longer merely an economic problem. They're a national emergency that threatens our security.
I think if you look at the President's statement yesterday, Canadians should be unpackaging this in three different ways. One, he has completely and totally reset the global trade order, the global trade environment. In Newfoundland and Labrador, we don't live in isolation. We don't live in a vacuum. Canada does not live in a vacuum. So whether he's putting tariffs on China, Japan, Taiwan, or other countries around the world, that will inevitably impact people here in Newfoundland and Labrador, whether it's in consumer goods or investment. If you're an if you're an investor, for example, in Japan right now, and you're looking to deploy hundreds of millions of dollars in a mine in Newfoundland, perhaps you'll sit on your hands during this uncertain time until you figure out some certainty in the global marketplace. So that is a problem. Then the second way we should look at this is U.S.-Canada relations and how the tariffs impact both sides of the border. And you will feel that directly in different consumer elements and different goods and services that are being provided back and forth. The obvious one is the auto sector right now. And finally, we should look at this in terms of our nation. And I will say one of the positive things that came from yesterday, one of the positive things that came from last week, is there has been a distinct change in the tone from the President of the United States, thanks to Prime Minister Carney. There has been a change where he no longer refers to our elected head of state as a governor. He refers to him as Prime Minister. He refers to Canada as a country. Now, I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth, but that is progress. That means that we've moved from a destructive conversation to a constructive conversation. My plea to the Prime Minister last week was, unless the President of the United States stops threatening our sovereignty, we should not be at any table. If he stops threatening our sovereignty and our identity and our values, then we come to the table. And the Prime Minister has certainly drawn that line in the sand, and we've seen the result of that in the change of posture and tone from the President of the United States.
Well, still on this topic, stock markets around the globe fell sharply Thursday morning in response to new U.S. tariffs. Donald Trump has put 10% levies on nearly all countries, with rates higher for more than 6 nations or trading blocs. The U.S. Commerce Secretary says those tariffs are needed, but as Richard Madden reports, not all American lawmakers are convinced.
I think it's going very well. President Donald Trump dismissing the global fallout from his aggressive tariff policy by comparing it to an urgent medical surgery that needed to be done.
It was an operation, like when a patient gets operated on, and it's a big thing.
The administration says it's short-term pain for long-term prosperity after Trump slapped sweeping 10% blanket tariffs on nearly every country in the world. Markets have since tanked, and economists are now warning of inflationary price hikes, retaliation from allies, causing a potential recession ignited by Trump's own trade and tariff war. But the White House says the president's actions will realign global trade, and the world simply needs to trust him.
Let Donald Trump run the global economy. He knows what he's doing. He's been talking about it for 35 years. You got to trust Donald Trump in the White House. That's why they put him there.
On Capitol Hill, more Republicans are publicly breaking from Trump's tariff agenda. Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley introduced a bill that would block Trump from imposing more tariffs without getting congressional approval first. Democrats, meantime, are seizing on the issue, saying consumers will suffer and Republicans will be punished.
I think what we're going to see is an enormous correction politically because of the enormous damage economically that Trump is inflicting on America.
Now, many here are calling this Trump's biggest gamble of his presidency, with huge economic and political consequences. But the White House believes these tariffs will eventually bring back manufacturing and jobs to the U.S., and they brush off criticism they might be wrong. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
Back in this country, Liberal leader Mark Carney returned to his role as Prime Minister to address Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs. He outlined his plan for Canada's short and long-term response to a U.S. policy shift he called a tragedy and historic.
The 80-year period when the United States embraced the mantle of global economic leadership, when it forged alliances rooted in trust and mutual respect, and championed the free and open exchange of goods and services, is over.
Carney announced duties to match the U.S. auto tariffs. He also pledged the tariff proceeds will be used to help Canadian workers hit by Trump's trade war. The Liberal leader said Canada must commit to accelerating industry and infrastructure, cutting interprovincial trade barriers, and building overseas trade relationships. Well, the head of the European Commission has described U.S. President Donald Trump's new tariffs as, quote, a major blow to the world economy. The European Union is planning to impose countermeasures if negotiations with the Trump administration fail. Crystal Gomansing has more.
La décision qui a été annoncée cette nuit est une décision brutale et infondée.
Brutal and unfounded. Those were the words used by French President Emmanuel Macron to describe tariffs announced by U.S. President Donald Trump Wednesday. In Paris, Macron met with French businesses seriously affected by the sweeping tariffs. He said the custom duties are a shock for international trade, and he's not the only European leader expressing frustration. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said the tariffs were fundamentally wrong. A universal 20% levy on all imports from the EU into the U.S. is expected to take effect April 5th. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president, said the bloc of 27 nations will respond strongly together, but that the EU would rather negotiate, not escalate.
The tariffs will also hurt consumers around the world. It will be felt immediately. Millions of citizens will face higher grocery bills. Medication will cost more, as well as transportation. Inflation will go up. And this is hurting in particular the most vulnerable citizens.
A lower tariff has been placed on the UK, just 10%. Prime Minister Keir Starmer says that's because the UK trade deficit with the US is, quote, fair and balanced.
It is actually a fair and balanced relationship if you look at the numbers. And of course, we've got decades worth of a special relationship with the United States. And I think it's by focusing on those features that we can take the necessary steps to secure our economy through hopefully a deal with options on the table.
The U.S. is the UK's second largest trading partner behind the EU. That relationship is worth roughly £315 billion. That's about 580 billion Canadian dollars. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Details.
Hi, it's Arlette Lazarenko with The Signal. There's a lot of talk about the federal election, but what are you not hearing? What are some issues that matter to you that you want us to cover as we head to the polls? You can email us at thesignal@cbc.ca.
A New Brunswick woman is planning to donate a kidney to her cousin in Ontario, but to start that process, she had to overcome a major obstacle, the lack of a primary care provider. Bobby Jean McKinnon reports.
Susanna McKenzie's suitor loves playing the violin and teaching music out of her St. John home, but if all goes well, she won't be doing either for about 4 to 6 weeks. That's because the 28-year-old hopes to donate one of her kidneys to her cousin in Ontario.
I don't really have the words to say what this means to me.
Mackenzie Smith has a genetic form of chronic kidney disease.
Based on my trajectory and based on the pattern that they've seen, especially over the last year, they're predicting within the next 2 or 3 months, I would be in full kidney failure.
Susanna didn't hesitate to offer one of her kidneys, but faced an obstacle she didn't expect. She can't donate or even get tested to see if she's a good match without a family doctor or nurse practitioner.
I was very surprised because I know there's such a shortage, especially out here in Atlantic Canada. So that was a big shock, and I definitely felt quite frustrated.
She was told potential living donors must have a complete medical checkup to confirm they're healthy enough to donate and require annual checkups after they donate.
Yeah, it is quite an obstacle, and I think for other people as well who would maybe want to donate, like that's a huge obstacle.
Her partner recently lost his doctor to retirement, and the nurse practitioner she had left the province a year ago. Since then, like thousands of other New Brunswickers, she's been on the wait list.
I think I called 14 different clinics, and a lot of them wouldn't even really let you finish the sentence. They're like, sorry, we're not taking any new patients, we're absolutely booked.
Now, after weeks of scrambling, Susanna has an appointment with a doctor found through a friend and will undergo the screening process shortly after.
If I can help, I would like to, and I would hope that someone would help me if I was in a similar situation.
Well, now to a very different kind of healthcare story. Would you know what to do with a pet facing a medical emergency? Sarah Hillier of Sarah's Snouts Pet Services in Springdale is certified in animal CPR and has this lesson in mouth-to-snout resuscitation.
So with performing CPR on a dog, you want to make sure that you're not going to startle it if it is alert. So you want to make sure you're making noise when you come up behind the dog just to see if there's a reaction. If you're not getting a reaction, of course, you do want to check for signs of life. So you're going to check, you can squeeze between their toes here to see if you get a response. You can tap on the inside of their eyelid to see, again, if you get a response, if there's any signs of life. You want to make sure that you're checking their airways. You want to take their head and straighten their neck out like this. You open their mouth, move their tongue so you can see down the airway, and if you see something, you can put your fingers down there and try to swipe it out. Of course, if not, then you want to start performing CPR. Before you start compressions, you can also check for a heartbeat. If you put your hand just in the hind leg here, you'll feel the femoral artery, so you can check for a heartbeat there before you begin. So it's much like the human CPR. You want to clasp your hands like this. You're not doing it with your elbows, you're doing it with your whole body weight. That allows you to have good force when you're doing it. So you want to make sure when you're doing compressions, you're compressing the chest between 1/3 and a halfway of the width of the chest of the dog. So often it's right here just behind the shoulder blade where you want to do this. And it's the same thing, so you go 30 compressions, again at the beat of Staying Alive or any song that's between 100 and 120 beats per minute. And then you want to come up here and you want to perform the breaths. So you make sure that you're closing the dog's mouth so there's no air escaping from there. You want to make sure you have a good seal around the nose of the mouth so that the breath is going in, and you do 2 breaths. Now on a live dog, you want to check and make sure that the chest is rising to make sure that the air is going into the lungs. And you just repeat that process until there's a sign of life, or of course until you get to the vet and they can take over.
something that's good to know, but I think both of us hope we never have to employ.
Never have
new
to
knowledge
employ.
that we hope we never have to use.
Because I know we're both animal lovers here.
We both have dogs. And we were both leaning in and watching, like, oh,
how do we do that? Yeah. I don't want to ever do that.
No.
But yeah, like you said, good to know.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Also good to know the forecast as we get closer and closer to the weekend, because there's lots of
yes, there's some weather on the way tomorrow for sure. Saturday's going to be decent. We'll get most of Sunday, and then Sunday night into Monday we have something else kind of coming our way. A little bit too early to have specifics or anything, but it's Newfoundland and Labrador in the springtime. We've got waves of weather on the way all the time. So let's take a look at our forecast here now. So Friday evening, we'll see that system moving out. We see some cloud in behind it, a little bit of flurries there. It looks like over parts of the Avalon Peninsula. We'll just see some more cloud moving over into Saturday morning, and we're going to have a pretty decent day here on Saturday. So we'll see some sun and cloud pretty well province-wide. We do have a cloud icon at 0 here for St. John's because, of course, that system moves out away from the Avalon last. Temperatures not too bad, between 2 degrees and -1 for the island, and just -5 in Nain on Saturday. So if you need to get out and do stuff Saturday, looks like your day to do that. On Saturday evening, we see some more snow move into Labrador West and start to spread across much of Labrador and then to the island for Monday. So we've got a less nice day. On Sunday, we see those flurries at 0 for Labrador West, a touch warmer in Happy Valley Goose Bay, some flurries on the coast there as well. For the southwest coast, this could be showers or it could be flurries at 1 degree, a touch warmer for the west coast, but for the rest of the island, for the most part, we see cloudy skies. We'll see a little bit warmer throughout central, about 4 degrees for Marystown, some sun and cloud for you folks, and some sun and cloud in the east in St. John's there as well. Taking a look at our 5-day now, what we have here is a warming trend as we head into Monday, Tuesday, Saturday, Sunday are your good days. That system will get to the east coast by Monday and in effect other parts of the province a little bit earlier into Sunday, and you can see that trend here in the 5-day. So we've got some snow or rain on Sunday and precipitation for the rest of the week there for Western Newfoundland, and you see it on Monday for Central, but things warming up towards the middle of the week there. For Lab West, we've got some nice sunny skies with some cloud on Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Same thing for the east. And this here is our picture of the day, and it comes from Lark Harbor. We've got this beautiful, serene setting, lovely Lark Harbor with some fishing boats here, and it looks to be like a setting sun, and that is courtesy of Connie Boland. Thanks for this beautiful picture and sharing it with us, as always, Connie.
Love it. Love the blue boats and the warm-looking skies. Very nice. Thank you very much, Connie. Well, that's it for us. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Hope you can join me and Heather again tomorrow.
Have a good night.